Okay, so good evening, everybody. Benvenuti. Yes, let's give it up for Mr. Sonny Allen.
Yes. He does his own stunts. Thank you, Sonny.
Yes.
You do your own stunts, I hear.
He's his own stunt man.
I did,
Let's
Okay.
let's give it up for Mr. Ryan Francois. Okay. Ms. Andrea Gordon.
Hello.
And myself, Chisomo Selemani. All right, so to start off tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about why we've been talking about Malcolm X. And so I have Andrea here because he's going to help translate so that we're all on the same page about this. And so the lovely Gigi, Luigi in the back, can we give it up for Gigi?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you. And Franco. Our wonderful organizers chose this theme specifically. And so in talking to Gigi, he mentioned to both Andrea and I on 2 different occasions that the reason why Policoro and Swing chose this theme is because Malcolm X, as a person, as the social justice hero that he is, represents us here in Policoro, represents people in the southern part of the world. And the people here, we're proximally closer to Africa, and so close to home, right? And everywhere we go, there are people who are privileged and people who are oppressed, right? Uh-huh. Yeah. So I'm going to give the mic to Andrea so he can translate that.
Ok, Malcolm X rappresenta, io faccio un po' una sintesi come sapete, insomma, Malcolm X rappresenta un po' tutta la parte l'oro, la parte nera, e qui a Policoro siamo del sud, è un po' come fosse il sud di tutto il mondo, quindi in realtà c'è qualcosa che ci accomuna, anche con le parti in difficoltà, le parti oppresse, in realtà un po' il sud di tutto il mondo è un po' simile, tutti i sud sono simili tra di loro.
So if you're asking yourself why Malcolm X this week, this is why. All right, so we have some questions and some thoughts about how Malcolm X, the person, relates to us as swing dancers as well. And we also have our stars here, so at times we may reference the movie as well. I'm going to hand it on to Andrea to talk a little bit about what she's found through her research in Malcolm X and thinking about the connection between struggle and empathy.
Right. So in looking at the theme, I think that if you were asking yourself why Malcolm X, you should know that we also asked ourselves why Malcolm X, and we want to make sure that we had sort of a unifying idea, a reason why we found that Malcolm X was relevant, and not just relevant, but maybe even critical to the way that we interact with one another today. And when we talk about jazz, and we talk about jazz music and the dancing, there is something about jazz which comes from the idea of struggle. So you have a lot of jazz comes out of this community of people, or African art comes out of this community of people who have been oppressed. And the thing about culture is that it is the one thing that cannot be taken from any of us. Thank you.
Ok, per la domanda perché Malcolm X, perché ci rappresenta, è legato un po' al discorso del jazz e del ballo, che sono comunati anche tra di loro, e tutto viene anche un po' tutto è comunato, queste cose qui, anche dall'idea di lotta che c'è anche dal jazz, che parte anche da come è nato il jazz.
Great. So this idea of struggle being so much a part of what the sort of culture of a people and the culture of their art is that if you are a person who has valuable things, a house, money, all of these things can be taken from you. Your family can be taken from you. But the way that you approach your life, the way that you approach even eating a meal, or the way that you worship, or the way that you move about in the world cannot be taken from you. And that is why the culture is so important to all of us. And that struggle, no matter what the struggle is, you still have culture left.
Ok, tutto è legato alla lotta, è legata alla cultura, no? Tutto quello che abbiamo, che lo riceviamo, ma tutto il resto ce lo dobbiamo un po' guadagnare, diciamo così. E questo è legato poi appunto a tutta la cultura di come facciamo tutte le cose, di come viviamo tutti i giorni, in sostanza.
And I think that if we watch the movie or know much about his life, we find that Malcolm Little becomes Malcolm X out of discovering more about this struggle, right? Of learning his history and learning his past. And that is where we get sort of the beginning or the formation of like the formidable sort of figure of Malcolm X. But there's still something it's not complete, right? He is very influential. He is heard and people want to follow him, but he still within himself has so much that he's himself conflicted, right? With just dealing with the struggle. Keep going.
Ok, crescendo Malcolm diventa malcolmx, che in realtà è anche qualcosa di non definito. C'è questa lotta, questa ricerca. Le persone l'hanno seguito per la lotta che lui ha fatto, ma lui stesso in realtà anche crescendo ha continuato a essere in una sorta di autoconflitto, quindi questa lotta anche lui ha continuato ad averla anche con se stesso, diciamo.
So yesterday, Sonny said something that was very important. You don't know where you're going until you know where you've come from. And Malcolm made his first pilgrimage to Africa to understand more about his own roots and where he comes from, and actually touch the culture of those people, and being a Muslim, what being a Muslim means outside of the Nation of Islam. And that's where he discovered empathy, which is what gave him the ability to not always struggle against the other, and that the other wasn't always the enemy. But that is what created what we now understand to be Malcolm's vision for a people, right? That was his when he came out of this sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for, like combative phase, he found peace with having the empathy to not only fight for what is right, but to empathize and identify with those who had oppressed him to begin with.
Ok, quindi Malcolm X nella sua ricerca, diciamo, vuole approfondire la sua cultura, le sue origini. Per farlo va in Africa a toccare con mano un po' quella che è la realtà, le origini della sua cultura, e diventa anche musulmano e fa di questa cosa qui, tra l'altro facendolo da un paese che non è di base musulmano, lui lo diventa, e in questo cerca la lotta sì, ma attraverso l'empatia, quindi un discorso pacifico e non di lotta fisica, ma di empatia, quindi entrare in contatto con gli altri.
Ta-da!
All right.
How do you say that in Italian? Ta-da.
Ta-da!
So with these ideas, Sonny.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was just wondering. I see you sitting down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know everybody is interested in Malcolm X. But in order to get the whole truth of Malcolm X, which was Little. Malcolm Little. Originally, he comes from the South. He came and wound up in Boston. He stayed in Boston, and when he left Boston, because he was riding what you call
Treat.
yeah, but what you call it? He was a waiter.
Serving, yeah.
A waiter.
Yeah.
Stop calling me. I don't know who it is. He was a waiter, and the thing is, he at that same time he used to go up there and listen to the fights and everything else, and he listened to Joe Louis, I think, fought while the train was coming into New York. And he went to New York and he came to 125th Street. When he got there, he met a guy, a West Indian there, that took his hand and showed him, because Malcolm was a hustler. Really, people in Harlem didn't know him as Malcolm Little. They knew him as Fifth Avenue Red. Fifth Avenue Red, he played pool, he was a pool hustler, and he was a pimp. He wasn't the greatest person in the world when he first came here. What changed Malcolm is when he went to jail. When they found him and, well, you see Spike Lee inside the movie, you couldn't hear me on this? I'm sorry. When they found Spike Lee played the other part of his partner, they got together and they used to go up there and rob people. And when he robbed people, what happened, he got caught and both of them went up to jail. That's the whole instance of his first beginning. His mother was put in a insane asylum because the social workers went up there and took him and his brother away from her. His father was killed by a train. Really, he wasn't killed by a train. Shut up. They went. I ain't even worried about that.
I'm white.
Yeah.
Tricky shit.
Yeah. Cut that off. And where was I at now?
You're
as
talking
I
about,
get old,
and I think this is emblematic, right, of this idea of struggle, right? Because I believe that Malcolm's father was a preacher.
Yeah. But in those days in the South, you're a preacher, you could be okay, but if you get too big, they'll kill you. That's with the Ku Klux Klan and et cetera.
I feel like, at least as an American, I feel like they try to separate religion from like ideas of like politics or whatever, but religion is highly political. Like religion itself is about a way for a community to behave, and it's almost a way of governing oneself. Religion is political, and so I think that is why so many of our, like at least in the US, so many of our ministers become civil rights activists and become huge political figures, because they're so impressed to do so based upon a belief system that comes out of those religions.
Yeah. Well, what happened now after he was...
Se mi ricordo tutto, perché nel frattempo... Comunque, insomma, noi non conosciamo la parte di Malcolm X, cioè la parte appunto dell'infanzia non la sappiamo poi la parte dopo di come diventa l'uomo più noto a tutti. Lui arriva dal sud, da una famiglia povera, poi perde il padre, diventa un cameriere, va a New York e lì appunto inizia una nuova vita dopo l'esperienza in prigione, che quindi è un evento decisivo che lo cambia il suo punto di vista, e poi da lì in poi diciamo cambia la sua visione sul mondo e inizia a diventare il personaggio che tutti conosciamo, arrivando da una famiglia povera, il sud tra l'altro in America, Ku Klux Klan, quindi razzismo, sono situazioni appunto ovviamente che cambiano la visione della sua vita anche in ottica futura. Insomma, ho fatto un po' una sintesi, spero di non aver perso pezzi pazzeschi, insomma.
And within Black American culture, you have the connection between art, politics, religion, all in church. So you have music, our gospel music. Norita, where's Norita? She's singing. Yeah, it's okay. So Norita, our musician, our singer, was mentioning that when she sees us dancing, it reminds her of her gospel tradition of shouting, right? And so even in swing and solo jazz, Who here has heard of shouts? Raise your hand. Shouts. Yeah. Yeah. So you find these things. You find dance. You find art. You find politics. You find all of that within church. And you can see at the time of the civil rights movement in the 60s, Malcolm X was a religious leader with the Nation of Islam, and Martin Luther King Jr. was a religious leader, is a pastor, Protestant pastor. So
Malcolm and Martin Luther King, you talking about?
Yeah, how he was
They
also.
never got along.
Well, they did, at the end they did. They
At the
did
end,
towards
they-
the end,
At the
yeah.
end, they got along.
But you know, all
Yeah, they
of
did.
like Al Sharpton, like there's so many different figures of the civil rights movement who had been ministers. I just think it's interesting for Malcolm X to have come from that background where his father was a minister and then killed, right, because of speaking out against the way that his people, his family was being treated. I think that was natural for Malcolm to pivot to something that felt like assimilation. He just wanted to fit in. He straightened his hair. He wore the popular clothes of the day. He mixed with people. He did what he was expected to do. And it was a way of him just of maybe protecting himself in some way, to not feel maybe some of that struggle. But he ended up in jail anyway,
Well, he ended in jail because him and his partner went up there and robbed this rich guy.
Right?
They got caught, and they went to jail. Then he met one of the people from Malcolm at the Muslims.
Specifically from the
Or-
Nation of Islam.
That's how he became a Muslim, from being in jail, And the thing with him, being in jail, he loved to read. And he got to the point that he could read the whole Bible, everything. And they used to try and tell him something. They used to have what you call a minister would come on a Sunday in the prison and talk to him. And he would tell the prison minister, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they would debate.
And they were going to say, what you talking about? He said, and he tell quote for quote the passages in the Bible and et cetera like that. And they never liked him on that. But when he did his time, he got out, that's when he went to Elijah Muhammad. And that was in Chicago. And then Elijah went up there and gave him a mosque in Harlem. And that's where he started out at. And he started out on 125th Street, where the state office building is now. That was actually Herbert's Diamonds. He used to stand on the street on a ladder and talk back and forth. And that's the beginning of Malcolm X,
I think that we wanted to connect this to our own experiences, and maybe within even like these dance spaces. Are there ways in which that we have felt like we tried to either assimilate, to just fit in, even though we may have felt othered or less than, or are there ways in which we felt like we have been in prison in the way that like we interacted with other people in these spaces? And if
we get the master here.
It's like should need translate.
Yeah, I was going to say we've gone a long time without
Yeah.
a little translation moment. So I'm going to have Andrea do his best.
Yeah.
Ok, qua vabbè, niente,
just the good
ragazzi.
bits, just the good bits.
Insomma, alla fine, vabbè, siamo partiti dal discorso che in realtà tutta è la politica, la religione, la cultura, l'arte, alla fine si fonde tutto anche nel modo di fare musica, in realtà anche il modo di ballare, di danzare, nel jazz e tutto quanto, in realtà si ritrova un po' tutto quanto collegato. Poi da lì c'è anche tutto il discorso di Malcolm X, che poi finisce in galera per aver rubato un uomo ricco, giusto? E quindi da lì quindi c'è questa cosa anche che non è banale, cioè non è un fatto, diventa più grave appunto per questo motivo. Lui lì sostanzialmente ha un sacco di tempo giustamente per leggere, si legge tutta la Bibbia sostanzialmente, quindi da cui poi trae tutta una serie di spunti e poi successivamente anche in strada va a parlare qui, perso un po' dei pezzi forse, comunque in realtà va a parlare con le persone, insomma, si comincia a fare la sua attività in prima persona.
Andrea? Sorry, not Andrea Gordon, but this is Andrea. You're amazing at your job.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Yeah, you really are. You're amazing at your job. Okay, so I'm actually going to ask for a little bit of audience participation as I talk about my story. How many of you, and I'll have Andrea translate as well, how many of you, when you've come to swing, have felt like, oh, maybe I don't belong? Who has felt like maybe I'm not going to get very many dances, or no one wants to dance with me? Yeah, so welcome to my story.
May I ask one more? May I ask
Sorry?
one more?
Yeah.
I think it's relevant too. What about who has felt like they need to change something about themselves in order to be more palatable to everyone else? I have to change something about me to fit in. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing on this here while we're getting into that area of dance?
Uh-huh.
The whole thing in your dancing that everybody does. A guy by the name of Mario Bowser, which he was Cuban, told me something a long time ago. He said, in order to know where you're going, you got to know where you came from.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the problem comes in at, because Europeans have a tendency to hear music different than Africans do. Really, when you dance, it's all rhythms come out of Africa. Every tune you do, when you get when you talk about Genghis Khan, and you see he had drums, but he learned how to play those drums when he went into Africa
Right.
and brought the drums back. And what it was, they called it talking drums. Talking drums was because every tribe that you had in Africa talk. They didn't talk with words. They talk with drums. Somebody in Tanzania had a certain way of making sound, but doom ba 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 doom ba ba ba. That they know. You could go anywhere in Africa. If they hear that sound there, they know it came from Tanzania.
Right.
The same thing if you go to the Zulus, have another way. All of them have different rhythms. So you could hear from all over. And that's where it started from, you know? And
Just somebody, do you want to speak more to that? I mean, being
I don't want
our
to
closest
get
link
really, I'm just trying to
to
get you
Africa.
to understand, but I don't want to get to the point where,
No, it's just-
because it's too
yeah.
much.
Chisomo, I think you
In that
can
part there.
speak about your
I'll let
experience.
you do it. You let me do it? Yeah.
First, for sure.
Ok, allora, noi europei abbiamo un modo differente di concepire la musica per un fatto proprio culturale e quindi l'ascoltiamo in modo differente. In realtà pensiamo appunto che tutti i suoni poi in realtà originariamente possono essere considerati arrivare dall'Africa e anche senza l'uso delle parole in diverse culture attraverso le percussioni, quindi sono dei ritmi poi che partono da lì, che noi percepiamo in maniera in realtà differente, ma sono legati poi a tutta una storia che arriva lì da quel modo di alcune culture come gli Zulu eccetera di utilizzare le percussioni anche senza proprio come suono.
What's interesting about my experience is that while I came from Africa and there are movements and music that make sense to me. When I stepped into swing, I felt this draw into swing, and it felt like it connected to my soul. How many of you have had that experience, right? Yeah. That's why we're here. But even with that feeling of connection, there were so many things about the community that made me feel like I didn't belong, that I shouldn't be here, or that I needed to change. I needed to be skinnier. I needed to wear vintage clothes. I needed to move in a very specific kind of way. And come to realize that those things that I was feeling that were telling me that I don't belong, they're actually not the point of what it is that we're doing. They're actually imported perspectives. They're all fine things to participate in, but they don't necessarily reflect the heart and the soul of what it is that we're doing. And then I wanted to bring in a point that Ryan had brought up yesterday, that even if you're from a particular cultural perspective, born in Zambia, raised in the US, lived in Zambia, lived in the US, so have Black American perspectives as well as Black African perspectives, I still have so much learning to do. So just because you look a particular color or you come from a particular place doesn't necessarily mean that you know everything about those cultural aspects. So Ryan, you've been very quiet and compliant, and I appreciate you.
He's been well trained over the last couple of days.
So,
Let's let Ryan out.
so Ryan, you're allowed to
afraid.
talk now.
You got to promise not to.
None of this total playtime. Go for it.
Does my microphone work? I don't know. Can you hear that? It's pretty cool. It's kind of interesting just talking about isolation. Like, have you ever felt uncomfortable? And I put my arm up, and it wasn't a joke. I mean, if I do a little my story, I guess, it's kind of maybe simple, a little different. I'm Black, but I'm British. Being British and Black is a very different thing to being American and Black. There's an identity issue, it's pretty much the same, but it's also different. The American story is told. It might not be told properly, but it is told. The British story is not told at all. As a Black British person, the sense of identity is very deeply confusing. I'm not from the Caribbean, but my parents are. But I'm identified by my parents for a place that I've never been to. I'm not identified as British because of the color of my skin and where my parents are from. So I'm born in Britain. I'm Black. I'm not British because I'm brought up to be told that I should go back to my own country on a banana boat. Yeah, or that you're not kind of Black enough to be from the Caribbean islands or the Americas and so on. But I grew up going home to a Black neighborhood with a Black set of parents from the Caribbean, uncles, aunts, you name it. And I discovered this thing, and I don't need to go into that long story, this thing called Lindy Hop when I was 18. The time I was 18, the life that I had lived meant that I'd never been a restaurant in my life. I had never been on a vacation. That's what rich white people did. I've never been on a plane. I'd never seen a beach. I'd never seen the other side of London. We grew up in the kind of poverty that even those things were denied. As a kid, I got my Christmas presents from the Fern Street settlement. It meant that charitable people who got their discarded toys, they would wrap them up and give them to kids like us. So I was used to, Action Man with one arm or something like that as a standard present. And I started to do this thing called Lindy Hop. It began in my school, and so everyone around me in my school was Black. we didn't take to it because we were not used to the idea that there are things that black people had created. So even the very image of Lindy Hop didn't exist in our minds. The music was associated with Elvis Presley, Bill Haley, Glenn Miller. Even then, we knew those names. I'd never heard of Count Basie, Duke Ellington, any of those. Lionel Hampton. That was a mystery to me. The very story of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, none of that. We had one day of black history in my entire school system life. And in that single day, I learned about people who were not me, who were captured, enslaved, put on ships, brought to the Caribbean, the Americas, and the UK as slaves. And I saw slave posters. If you ran, they cut your foot off, your arm. That was it. There's your history done. So I'm going a long way round, and I'm sorry, he's writing notes now.
Manco all'università, una roba così.
For a really simple thing is that, like, I discovered a dance that had an identity that gave me an identity. I saw black people doing things that I didn't know black people did, i.e. things that were endeavors of success rather than failure. And it had never been taught to me. However, there was also no industry for it. Whenever I walked into a room and said that I was a Lindy Hopper, I may as well have said that I'm a black person, because it had no value. So, in having no value in the thing that you specialize in, it meant that, like, the work that you did had no value. So you didn't get the work. You had to create and reinvent it. And something needed to be reinvented, which was essentially you. So I had to walk away from the blackness that I grew up with, i.e. the black people around me, my friends, my relatives, to join a world that had no image of me in it, even though I was leading it as his teacher. So I walk into rooms where I see no one looking like me, but knowing that I have to build something that will eventually show me in the room. And in order to do that, I had to walk away from every black person that I knew who actually fought the idea of my very existence of why are you doing that? And the only reason was because in history was an identity. And I think this is what this talk is about. There's a recognition, an understanding of self is what gives you a sense of dignity. And I have many times walked into many countries, being maybe the first or the only black person teaching, dancing, in a sea of people who don't look like me, wondering when will be the time there'll eventually be some people who look the same, re-embracing the thing that they created in the first place, like a massive circular wheel that keeps going round to, but this is something that was created by black people, but not enjoyed by those same people. And what I like about maybe these kind of talks is that somewhere in all of that, there has to be a kind of addressing of how we keep falling through the gaps of the things that we've in some ways created, therefore losing identity and then feeling like we don't belong in the spaces that we created in the first place. And yeah, so that's kind of some of my story.
Yeah.
Andrea,
He could remember all that.
good luck.
He has 3 paragraphs.
Allora, in realtà la differenza tra... No, ok. poi aiutatemi nel caso in cui la differenza tra essere un nero in America, un afroamericano in America, è una cosa, esserlo in Gran Bretagna, da dove arrivo, è un'altra. E in America quantomeno questa storia è, se non quantomeno risolta, è stata comunque dibattuta. Negli Stati Uniti, in Gran Bretagna questo invece no, per cui anche dal suo punto di vista l'identità è confusa perché non è chiara, alla fine è inglese ma non lo è, arriva da una famiglia che arriva da un luogo in cui lui viene identificato ma di fatto un luogo che lui non conosce, quindi in realtà fa parte di una realtà in cui viene identificato in modo diverso, non è realmente inglese ma non è neanche africano, quindi c'è una... Com'è? Caraibico, scusa. E quindi in realtà c'è questa differenza. E poi in realtà a 18 anni lui inizia l'incontro diciamo con l'indie hop, quindi tutta una cultura nuova, quindi lascia tutta una realtà che lui conosce, la sua comunità, insomma, e scopre delle cose nuove. Si rende conto anche che la musica è diversa, è associata a qualcosa di diverso, come poteva immaginare come Elvis Presley, cioè tutta una serie di altri personaggi, Count Basie, eccetera. E poi solo dopo, quindi in realtà si rende conto, poi comincia a prendere il discorso legato alla schiavitù, alla storia delle popolazioni nere, di tutto quello che hanno vissuto la schiavitù, il fatto di essere stati portati via dal luogo nativo come schiavi, e si trova a capire anche del fatto che ci sono contesti dove le persone di colore non sono considerate di valore e quindi di conseguenza anche realizzare che anche il tuo lavoro in quanto persona di colore quindi non ha valore. Quindi lui in realtà si rende conto alla fine che si trova in mezzo a persone diverse, scopre una realtà diversa da quella che lascia e se ho capito bene in realtà si trova in un posto dove ci sono delle cose create da persone nere ma che di fatto non appartengono alla popolazione nera, di fatto, credo, una cosa di... No? Esatto, non hanno goduto del successo, altri esatto, hanno goduto poi del successo del loro lavoro e questa è una cosa ovviamente molto forte, insomma.
Sorry, Uncle Sonny. So recognizing time, and thank you all for listening so deeply to what we're saying. I want to give you a takeaway. I want to give you something that you can do to move us through this process a bit. So Ryan referenced this idea of losing identity, losing the past, and Uncle Sonny talked about needing to remember the past in order for us to know where we're going. And one way that we can do that is through deep listening, is through investigation. And so wherever you find people who are oppressed, you have stories that aren't told. You have stories that no one's listening to. And it's really important for us to ask ourselves the question, who are we not listening to?
This is empathy.
Sorry?
This is empathy, right?
And
this is a necessary part of the culture and of the jazz that we are dancing. It's part of the art that we're creating. Is not just that it comes out of something that may have been terrible. We have music like Jump for Joy, where the whole song is about joy, but out of a struggle. It's about listening and understanding that that's not a song that we go ba-doop-ba-doop-ba-doop-ba-doop-ba-doop, but it's about a celebration and about hallelujahs and about being ever so grateful. And the way that we dance should be different than something that is light and fluffy, is heavy, but is joyful, right? That comes out of empathy, listening to people speak, listening to the music.
Can I say one thing? And then I'll get away from this. I think that in order, like I said before, in order to know where you're going, you gotta know where you came from. In order to know, you have to hear the music. I would like to do an experiment. Let me see. Can I have 2 volunteers to come up here?
2 volunteers?
2 volunteers.
2 volontari che si immolano.
Hey, just 2 volunteers. Just come up here.
Okay, so brave.
Very good.
So brave.
All right then.
Courageous.
Yeah, right. Give them a hand.
Courageous.
Now, what I want you to do is I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah? Now, I want you to do the same thing now. Count it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Do you hear anything different? Do you hear anything different? You think it's a trick, but it's not.
Everyone does it different.
No.
Like the language.
No.
Like you're talking.
The reason why I say that is this. All music has 8 beats. From Latin to swing, anything really, 8 beats. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Swing, right? Latin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But if in order to do that, you have to hear it. Now, I want you to go up there and say the same thing again, but this time do it slow. Count to 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And you still don't hear it, right? I'll tell you the reason why. When you was a kid and you was just born and growing up, your mother went up there and tried to teach you how to talk, right? So in order to talk and get a sound out, you have to form your lips in a certain way to get a sound, right?
Right.
All right then. Now let's try the same thing again. Do the same 8 counts. Good. 1.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Now I'll show you what you should hear. 1 is sharp. 2 is this way. 1, 2. You understand? Okay? Right. All right then. Now, you're going to do 1, 2, and now what? 3 is what? Sharp. 3. Right? How is 4? No. You don't form your lips that way. 4 is the same thing as 1, right? 4. Now say 5.
5,
Good. Now say 6.
6.
Now you hear the difference now? 6 goes this way.
Yeah.
So there's 2 sounds that doesn't go this way, which is the 2
And the 6.
and the 6. So if you're swing or if you're doing Latin, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's accent. Once you could hear that, you could do any dance there is. Because now when you write music, the dominant figures in music is the 2, 4, 6, and 8. And swing. In Latin, just the 2 and the 6 is dominant. So therefore, that's what you have to hear. Once you hear that, I could do ah. You see what I'm talking? I changed the expression to do that. When you dance, listen to the music. You understand? Because if you hear it here, it'll make sense down here. But if you can't hear it here, it ain't gonna make no sense down here. You just gonna be doing steps. But if you sing it, then you do ba ba da 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 ba ba da da. You see what I'm talking about? Not just the tip.
But
Oh, so
Sonny is available for the rest of this
Yes.
conversation.
yes,
All
please
week.
find Uncle Sonny and chat with him because his stories are amazing.
They're wild.
And
They are wild.
And tying this back to this idea of deep listening, and as Andrea indicated, this relates to the notion of empathy. It's important for us to deeply engage in the music, but to also deeply engage with one another. So I would ask you to think about who you haven't connected with, and I understand that in Europe you may not always have access to Black Americans. So as you are committed to a dance form that is Black at its very core, you may not have access to Black folks, as Ryan mentioned. But as you do, engage in a way that is open. And I'm saying open because you don't necessarily have to chase us all down. That's kind of weird.
It's weird.
But we're happy to, especially those of us who are hired, we're paid to be here, so we're happy to chat with you and to connect with you.
But we also really like to dance.
We also really
you.
like to dance
We like
as
to
well.
be asked to dance.
Yeah.
And just the same way that you are here and you want to dance, we also would love for you to engage us how you would engage each other and allow us to feel welcome in the same way.
And I'm going to do a quick plug.
Do it.
If you want to hear more about this type of engagement, this type of deep listening, the journey of connecting to Black cultural values, there's a little place on the internet called Integrated Rhythm.
Yay!
And so Integrated Rhythm is a show with Chisomo and and so the two of us talk about these kinds of topics. And so if you would like more of that,
Absolutely.
listen to us. So
Yes, I
that.
would love for you to say something.
So yes, and Ryan has our finale thoughts.
Dang it.
It's just a small thing, actually, and I think it's maybe on the same subject, and maybe we're talking now about our behavior. My observation, what's happened in the Lindy community and the nature of where it's gone is that we're attracted naturally to the same thing. We're attracted to joy. We're attracted to fun. And because we're attracted to joy and fun, we take an art form and we pick that part. What we drop is the pain and the suffering and the things that make us feel uncomfortable. And if there's something that I would say in the embracing of the thing that you don't do, is to maybe just recognize and be okay about at least looking at the pain. Because for me, jazz, cultural dances of any kind, cultural experience, music, singing, you name it, has always been about those two elements, the joy and the pain.
Yep.
And when we fall into the role where we feel that we're losing identity is when you cherry pick and only pick the joy.
Joy, right.
Because that relates to you and it allows you to stop seeing the other. And that's when we become invisible. It's really a choice of seeing other people's pain and being more observant to it and not just picking the joy because that's the easy option.
And I bet, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I bet this kind of investigation, this kind of study will ultimately improve your dancing. I think that this kind of really deep thought about the way that we engage with each other, about the way that you engage to the music will actually improve your dancing. I just want to say thank yous. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here and for translating for us, making sure that we were understood. Thank you to the organizers, Franco, Gigi, and Maria. Thank you so much for allowing us to do this second talk.
Yeah, all night, right?
Yeah, all night. And
Right.
a very,
Wait
sorry.
a second. If you take me on, if there's any of the people in the audience that's interested in things like what I was talking about or what Ryan is talking about, pull us to the side
yeah,
and let us talk to you individually. Because talking to you like this, or like this, some will get it, some won't get it.
right.
But this way here, I can do it personally and tell you what I'm talking about when I'm talking about music. Because once you can hear that part of the music, your dancing will be 10 times better.
Yeah.
You know? That's the only thing I'm saying.
No, we agree. I think we agree. And I want to thank you both, because I think that like what I didn't say about my own personal history is that I came into the dance where I didn't feel like I saw myself in the room either. But seeing Ryan for the first time at Camp Jitterbug, or seeing Marie and Jai for the first time at Harangue, those things kept me in for a while so that I could be the person in the room for someone else to see. So you went through a lot, Sonny. You went through a lot to to continue this tradition. Ryan has been through a lot and had to distance himself from a lot to be a part of this tradition, and these are the things that allow me and Chisomo to be here. So I just want to thank you both for your contributions to a generation of dancers behind you. All right. Chisomo, thank you for being my buddy and cheering on and getting me through this, and you are amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Okay.